Every night, without exception, Rosa Vega goes to her daughter's bedroom. She keeps the room the same way it has always been. The twin bed with the yellow quilt, the desk where the homework used to happen, the shelf with the trophies, volleyball, 2 of them, from the rec center league. The window faces the street and on the sill, in a small glass holder that Rosa has replaced perhaps a dozen times over the years because the glass eventually gets cloudy and Rosa believes it should be clear. There is a white votive candle. She lights it at dusk. She has done this every single night for 25 years. 9,125 candles. Give or take 9,125 evenings of Rosa Vega standing at her daughter's windowsill with a match or a lighter, or, once during the monsoon blackout of 2017, a flashlight held in one hand and a candle in the other. Because the power was out, but the candle was not optional. The candle was never optional. She lit it so her daughter could find her way home. She lit it so anyone who drove down that street at night would know that someone in that house had not forgotten. She lit it because it was the only thing she could do, and so she did it with a completeness and a consistency that had no room for exceptions. 25 years. And then, in the spring of 2024, detectives called Rosa Vega and told her what they had found. To understand what that phone call meant, what it gave the family, and what it could not give them, you have to go back to Tucson in the summer of 1999. You have to go back to a July evening when the desert heat was still full in the air at 7 o'clock, and the smell of creosote hung over the neighborhood the way it does before the monsoon comes. You have to understand who Marisol Vega was, and why the candle in the window was not simply grief. It was a declaration. The Vega family had been in Tucson for 3 generations before Marisol was born. Ernesto Vega's grandfather had come up from Sonora in the 1940s and put down roots in the South Side barrio with the permanence of someone who intends to stay. And the family had stayed. Through changes in the neighborhood and the city and the country, through everything. Ernesto worked for the city water department. Rosa worked at the elementary school 2 blocks from their house, first as a classroom aide, and then, after taking night classes for 4 years, as a reading specialist. They had 4 children: Marisol, then Rafael, then Elena, then Daniela. The house on Cali Mesquite had a tile roof and a small front yard with oleander along the fence, and a lime tree in the back that produced more limes than the family could use, and so Rosa made lime cakes and brought them to the school, and to the church, and to the neighbors. Marisol was 17 in the summer of 1999. She was the eldest, and she wore it naturally, the way some firstborns carry the weight of being first as a burden, and others carry it as a kind of gentle authority. Marisol was the second kind. She helped with the younger ones without being asked. She translated for her grandmother at the doctor's office. She worked weekends at her Uncle Teo's flower shop on South 12th Avenue, where she had a talent for arrangements that Teo said was something you either had or you didn't, and Marisol had it. She sang second soprano in the choir at Sacred Heart, and she had a journal, spiral-bound, with a sunflower on the cover, that she wrote in every night before she slept. She had requested applications from the University of Arizona nursing program in the spring. She had told Rosa she wanted to work in pediatrics. She had said she liked that nurses were the ones who stayed in the room. She was the kind of person who stayed in the room. On the evening of July 14, 1999, Marisol told her mother she was walking to her friend Valeria's house, 6 blocks away on Cali Rincon. It was 7:15 p.m. The sun was still up. The walk was one she had made dozens of times. She wore cut-off shorts and a yellow t-shirt, and she had her Walkman clipped to her waistband. She kissed Rosa on the cheek. She waved at Daniela, who was 6 years old and sitting on the front step eating a popsicle. She walked down Cali Mesquite toward the corner and turned right, and that was the last time anyone in the family saw her. Valeria waited until 8 o'clock. Then she called the Vega house. Rosa answered the phone at 8:12 p.m. and said Marisol had left over 45 minutes ago. Valeria said she had not arrived. There was a silence on the line that both of them would remember for the rest of their lives. Rosa called Ernesto at work. She called her sister. She walked the route herself, Calle Mesquite to the corner, right on Aguilar, down to Rincon, calling Marisol's name in the dark. There was no answer. There was no sign. The Pima County Sheriff's Office received the call at 9:40 p.m. The officer who responded was a 28-year-old patrol deputy named Sandra Okafor. She took the report, noted Marisol's description, logged the clothing, the route, the walkman. She walked the 6-block path with a flashlight. She found nothing on the route itself. At the midpoint of the walk, the stretch of Aguilar between the two cross streets, a block that ran along an empty lot, she found a cigarette butt in the dirt at the edge of the road and a partial scuff mark in the dust that was consistent with a struggle or a sudden stop. She photographed both. She bagged the cigarette. She noted the location in her report with the precision of someone who has learned to record everything and decide later what matters. The community search began at sunrise, by 8 a.m. On July 15th, there were 60 volunteers in the neighborhood. The church organized a phone tree. Teo closed the flower shop. Handmade posters, Marisol's school photo Xeroxed at the library. Her name in black letters above the Vega home phone number went up on every telephone pole in a 12-block radius. Ernesto walked every alley in the neighborhood. Rosa stayed near the phone. A man named Victor Crane was interviewed on July 17th, 3 days into the search. He was 34 years old and worked as a youth program coordinator for the Pima County Parks Department. He had run the summer volleyball program at the rec center on South 6th Avenue, where Marisol had played at 12 and 13. He was in the records as someone who knew the family neighborhood. He had been seen on Aguilar sometime in the week before the disappearance by a neighbor who mentioned it in passing to the investigative team. He came in voluntarily. He answered every question. He was calm and cooperative. His alibi for the evening of July 14th was his wife and a neighbor at a cookout, confirmed by both. He was not charged. He was not held. He went back to his job at the Parks Department and his house in the northwest part of the city, and his 2 children, and his life, which continued without interruption. The lead investigator on the case, Detective Hector Paz, pursued 11 other persons of interest over the following 18 months. He looked at a registered offender living 4 streets, over whose alibi was weak, but whose parole officer confirmed his location. He looked at a man who had made an unwanted advance toward Marisol at the flower shop. He looked at an ex-boyfriend of Valeria's, who had a history of following women. All were eliminated. The cigarette butt from Aguilar was processed by the State Crime Lab and returned a DNA profile. Male, unknown, no match in any database that existed in 1999. The case remained open. No charges were ever filed. Rosa Vega lit the candle on the windowsill that first night and every night after. By 2005, 6 years had passed. Rafael was 20. Alina was 17. Daniela was 12 and had never known her family as anything other than what it had become. A family organized around an absence, around the candle, around the particular silence that settles into a house where one person is missing and everyone else is learning to live in the space she used to occupy. Daniela grew up understanding the candle the way other children understand grace before dinner or a flag on a front porch, as something you do because it means something, even when you cannot fully articulate what. Ernesto developed heart problems in 2009. He had his first surgery in 2011, the surgery during which Rosa called their neighbor Dolores and asked her to light the candle while they were at the hospital, because she could not be in two places, and she was not willing to let the candle go out. Dolores lit it every night for 8 days. When Rosa came home, she thanked her at the door and went directly to the bedroom to check. On Marisol's birthday every year, March 4th, Rosa went to the store and bought a spiral-bound journal with a sunflower on the cover. She had found a brand that made one. She put it on Marisol's pillow. She did not open it. By 2024, there were 25 of them in a box in the closet, still in their wrappers. One for every year. One for every page Marisol did not get to fill. The formal case review request that Rosa submitted in 2007 received an acknowledgement and a follow-up call from a detective who told her the file was active and that new leads would be pursued as they emerged. She submitted another in 2013. The department told her the same thing. She kept every letter. She kept every phone number. She never stopped making calls. Ernesto Vega died in October of 2019. He was 68 years old, and he had spent 20 years not knowing where his daughter was or what had happened to her. And the weight of that had compounded everything else in a way that the doctors couldn't measure and the family could see clearly. He died in the same house where Marisol had grown up, and the candle was burning in the window of her room when he passed. Rosa kept lighting it. In 2022, the Pima County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit received a new allocation of resources through a state grant specifically designated for forensic genealogy testing on unsolved cases with existing DNA evidence. The unit was led by Sandra Okafor, the same patrol deputy who had walked the route on Aguilar in the dark on the night of July 14, 1999, and who was now 55 years old and had spent her career in the sheriff's department and had never fully stopped thinking about the cigarette butt she had bagged at the edge of the empty lot. She had one rule in the cold case unit. When the technology changes, every file gets a second look. The Vega file had DNA. The DNA had never been run against a genealogy database. That had not been possible in 1999. It was possible now. She pulled the file in November of 2022. She read every page. She sent the DNA profile to the genealogy lab. Every case on this channel is built from weeks of work, records requests, cross-referencing, the painstaking reconstruction of lives that deserve to be understood in full. If you want us to keep telling these stories, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Drop us a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from. It matters more than you know. Now, back to Tucson, back to Rosa, and back to what Sandra Okafor found when she finally ran the DNA that had been waiting in an evidence locker for 23 years. The forensic genealogy process works by uploading an unknown DNA profile to public ancestry databases. The same services where ordinary people trace their family trees, and then identifying distant relatives of the unknown contributor. From those relatives, genealogists work backward through family trees, narrowing the field, until they arrive at a small number of possible identities for the person who left the DNA. It is painstaking work. It took 14 months. In January of 2024, the genealogy lab contacted Sandra Okafor's unit with a result. The DNA from the cigarette butt on Aguilar had matched to 2 second cousins, both of whom had registered with an ancestry website for ordinary family history reasons, and neither of whom had any knowledge of what their cousin had done in Tucson in the summer of 1999. Working from those matches, investigators traced the family tree to a single male contributor. His name was Victor Crane. Victor Crane had died in March of 2021, liver disease. He was 56 years old, and he died in a hospice facility in Scottsdale, having spent 22 years as the person who killed Marisol Vega while the Vega family lit a candle in her window every night and waited. Sandra Okafor sat with that for a long time before she made the next call. The case was simultaneously confirmed by a separate discovery. In February of 2024, a surveying crew conducting a site assessment for a housing development northwest of the city found human remains in the Sonoran Desert, on land that had been empty scrubland in 1999 and was now the edge of a subdivision. The site was 11 miles from the Vega home on Cal Mesquite. The remains were sent to the Pima County Medical Examiner. Forensic analysis confirmed that they were Marisol Vega. She had been there since the summer of 1999. She had been 11 miles away while her family drove past the edge of that desert on their way to school, to work, to the grocery store, to the hospital where Ernesto had his surgery, for 25 years. Victor Crane's background, reconstructed by investigators and released publicly in the weeks following the confirmation, revealed a profile that the community found impossible to reconcile with the man they thought they knew. He had worked for the Parks Department for 11 years after Marisol's death. He had run youth programs. He had attended community events. Several people who had worked with him in those years told reporters they felt physically altered by the information. Not just shocked, but structurally changed, as if something load-bearing had been removed from their understanding of the past. His wife, who had not known, filed a statement through an attorney saying she had no knowledge and was cooperating fully with investigators. His adult children did not comment publicly. The Parks Department expressed condolences to the Vega family and said it had no record of any prior concern about Crane during his employment. The cigarette butt Sandra Okafor had bagged on the night of July 14, 1999, had been sitting in evidence storage for 25 years. The DINA from it had been waiting for a database large enough to find the right family, and the database had taken 25 years to grow to that size. That is the specific arithmetic of this case. The evidence was always there. The technology had to catch up. Because Crane was deceased, there was no arrest. There was no trial. There was no sentencing. What there was, on April 9, 2024, was a press conference at the Pima County Sheriff's Office, at which Sandra Okafor stood at a podium and said Victor Crane's name, and said Marisol Vega's name, and said what had been established by forensic evidence. And the reporters wrote it down, and it went into the public record, and it became permanently, irreversibly true. Rosa Vega was not at the press conference. She was 71 years old and she was not well, and Daniela had told her what they had found by phone the evening before. Sitting next to her on the couch in the house on Calle Mesquite, while the candle burned in the window of Marisol's room. Rosa had listened. She had not said much. She had held Daniela's hand. Daniela Vega was at the press conference. She was 31 years old, and she had prepared a statement, and she read it standing very straight with both hands on the paper. And when her voice caught once, she stopped and waited, and then continued. She said she had been 6 years old when Marisol disappeared. She said she did not have many clear memories of her sister. Flashes, mainly. The sound of her singing in the kitchen. The smell of the flowers she brought home from the shop sometimes, wrapped in paper. A Saturday afternoon when Marisol had painted Daniela's fingernails with her own nail polish and let her pick the color. She said she had grown up inside the absence of her sister, the way you grow up inside weather. You don't remember a time before it. It is simply the condition of your life, and you learn to carry it. She said she had grown up watching her mother light the candle. She said she wanted people to understand what that meant. Not what it looked like from the outside. She had heard it described as vigil, as faith, as devotion. And all of those things were true, but from the inside, she said. The candle was something simpler and harder than any of those words. It was her mother refusing to let the world forget that Marisol had existed and mattered, and was loved, and was owed something. Not closure. She said that word had never meant anything to her. But acknowledgement. The candle was a demand, lit every night against the possibility that the world would move on and decide that a girl from the south side of Tucson, who went for a walk on a July evening and never came back, was simply gone. And that was the end of the story. That was not the end of the story. She said the call the night before had not brought her sister back. She said she understood that. She said what it had given her family was the truth. The correct, complete, finally documented truth. And she said she was going to spend the rest of her life deciding what to do with it. Marisol Vega was 17 years old. She sang second soprano. She arranged flowers with the kind of instinct her uncle said you couldn't teach. She wrote in a journal every night because she believed that the days of a life deserved to be recorded, that the ordinary moments were worth keeping. She was walking 6 blocks on a summer evening with a Walkman clipped to her waistband and the whole next year in front of her. Senior year, nursing school applications, the University of Arizona, pediatrics, a future that was entirely and completely hers by right. There are 25 journals in a box in a closet on Cali Mesquite. Every one of them has a sunflower on the cover. Every one of them is still in its wrapper. Rosa bought them because Marisol would have filled them. Because the kind of person who writes in a journal every night does not stop. They just keep going. And somewhere in the arithmetic of grief, Rosa decided that the journals should exist even if they couldn't be filled. That the space for Marisol's words should be kept open even in the absence of Marisol's words. 25 years of blank pages. 25 years of a windowsill candle. The same refusal, expressed 2 different ways. The night after Daniela came home from the press conference, Rosa lit the candle the way she always did. Daniela watched her do it. She did not say anything. Rosa did not say anything either. She lit the match. She held it to the wick. She waited for the flame to take. And then she set the candle on the sill in the clear glass holder and she stood at the window for a moment, looking at the street outside. The same street she had looked at 9,000 nights in a row. Then she turned away from the window and went to make dinner. Before we close, I want to ask you 3 things. First, Marisol's remains and Victor Crane's Dina were both sitting in evidence, one in the desert, one in a lab, for 25 years while Rosa lit that candle every night. What does it mean that justice, when it finally arrived, came from the same cigarette butt a 28-year-old patrol deputy bagged on her first night on the case? Second, Victor Crane died in 2021, 3 years before he was named. He never heard Marisol's name said in a courtroom. He never faced her family. For the families who are left in that position, a perpetrator dead before the truth is known, what does justice actually look like, and is naming enough? Third, Daniela said the candle was her mother's way of refusing to let the world forget. How many families are doing something like that right now? Some private, daily act of keeping a name alive. And how many of those cases are sitting in evidence lockers, waiting for a technology that doesn't exist yet? Leave your answers below. Marisol Vega's name is now in the permanent record alongside the truth of what happened to her. The candle did what Rosa needed it to do. It kept her daughter present until the world was finally ready to tell the truth about where she had gone. If you believe that persistence matters, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for watching.